the Family Pictures podcast, and I'm Jim Groom, joined by my co-host,
Michael Branson Smith.
And we're here to knock out yet another John Hughes production.
Technically our third, right?
Our third, and it's interesting because we're going to be talking about Some Kind of Wonderful, a 1987 teenage film. I want to say this right away. My wife absolutely hates this genre with a passion. So I told her, look, this week we're going to have to at some point watch Some Kind of Wonderful, which is a 1987 teenage,
we may just have to make this the month of hated movies by Angela, because I feel like since we did Say Anything, we need to bounce back to Cameron Crowe next week, and then with The Wild Thing. Have you ever seen The Wild Thing?
Oh, yeah, I love The Wild Thing.
Yeah, and that would be pretty, because it'd be another Eric Stoltz film, too, which I think is a more interesting role for him, too.
Yeah, I agree. And she actually she always gives me my next film. So I might have a new next film once you choose yours.
Okay.
So you do you, Michael, as they say.
Well, I actually have that. If we stay on theme, I have something very different. Will, but come on, let's do this actual podcast and not talk about the future.
I'm sorry. I'm just so excited. I'm ready for the next one, and it's already this one. So this is probably the last of the John Hughes teen films. He moves on and does stuff like She's Having a Baby, Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, Home Alone, Beethoven. So he's still always kind of in the family genre. He never leaves that.
No.
But his specific teen films that make him so famous, this is the last of them. And I wanted to do a little pop quiz with you here, Michael.
Yep.
Can you name all of John Hughes's teen films?
I think I can, and I did not look at the IMDb.
Are you sure?
Well, I've read it, but
Did you AI it?
I did not look this up once I saw the question was there, which I easily could have. But I think we got his first is 16 Candles.
Yes.
Then we have Pretty in Pink.
Yes.
Then we have this film, which actually before that comes Breakfast Club.
Yes.
Then we have Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yes.
And then this.
Yeah, it's those five. Very good. I'm very impressed.
And I even got them in order.
Chronological order.
Oh, I didn't? Shoot. When did Ferris Bueller's come out? I don't remember.
Came out the year before this one.
Okay. Yeah, this was the last one. I had it right. I corrected myself. Don't give me this. Yeah, I did.
Sorry. Anyway, but that's not what this is about. I am in love with you, so I don't want to actually have to bicker on this. This is interesting because there's a lot going on offset for this film, and that's kind of interesting. You brought in the whole Martha Coolidge thing, which I want to talk to, but presumably the two stars of this film are Leah Thompson and Eric Stoltz, right? And there's a third, Mary Stuart Masterson, who we'll get to, and we'll talk a lot about.
You should keep in mind, she was the first one chosen by John Hughes. So I would argue that she's the star from the start, because Leah Thompson is literally chosen at the last minute by Deutsch.
Yeah, but Mary Stuart Masterson probably has the lowest profile of the stars at this time, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's probably
in
true.
terms of being star power.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you mean. Who's on the poster? They're all three are on the poster, but who's the ones that are the audience draw? And
I learned this too as a point. Mary Stuart Masterson got this job because her mom, who was the mom in 16 Candles, said to John Hughes, "Hey, my daughter, she's pretty talented. Check her out." Right. And he saw her and he said, "I really like that view. She's drummer girl." And so I watched a lot of interviews with John Hughes, and he's a trip, but we'll get to that.
He's a weird dude. And
trip.
And what about what the F is going on with Kevin Bacon being the interviewer?
Oh, I love that interview.
That was so performative.
It's crazy. It was crazy. So anyway, there is an interview on the internet. Find it, with John Hughes being interviewed by Kevin Bacon. We'll probably talk about it during this, but it's a joy because John Hughes is kind of a trip. But anyway, Leah Thompson is coming off one of the biggest bombs in 1980s history.
Yeah.
Howard the Duck, known for being the first Marvel film, which was an absolute bomb. In fact, Robert Williams was supposed to be part of it, but he hated the whole kind of limitations that were imposed on him that he walked away. And the film just kind of spiraled out of control and became a terrible film, and was a terrible film. I watched it in the 80s. It was not something I always kind of wanted to return to it to see if it's any better now, but I never have.
I never watched it.
Oh, it's terrible. The duck is just so annoying to look at. So there is that. So anyway, the story here, and you can jump in at any point, Michael,
right.
is she's desperate. And I saw it in the DVD extras where she's like, I'll basically take anything. And Eric Stoltz bikes up to her house with this script in hand and says, look, Leah, they've worked together before on Back to the Future before he got canned.
Yep, for being too emo.
And they were in The Wildlife, too. That's another one.
Yeah,
right?
Which they're great in that together.
Yeah. The Wildlife is great because I love Chris Penn.
We'll find, yeah, me too. It's casual.
It's casual, right? It's good for the family. It's good for the relationship. It's good all around. I quote that movie all the time.
We'll find a way to do that one eventually.
So anyway, he comes to her with the script. She reads the script and she's like, man, I'll do anything right now because Howard the Duck was a massive flop. And
she did turn it down initially, though. For a hot minute, she turned it down. Howie Deutsch just tells us that. She was a little anxious about how, kind of stilted like this character was, where she was just the bitchy rich girl. She was rewritten. She was initially she was rewritten as more of the rich girl, not the same side of the tracks kind of poor girl, that middle class girl that she became, who has more perspective as a result. So that's why she initially turned it down.
Yeah, and she does ultimately love the fact that Amanda Jones, who's her character, does come from the same side of the tracks as the rest of the kids who are trying to become rich. And so that does in some ways make her more complex. You know, the limits of that we can talk about. But interestingly enough, at the time she took this role, she was engaged to another character we've seen before with Breaking Away, Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
And they were engaged for 3 years.
Yeah.
Then she met, I guess, and soon had a relationship with Howard Deutsch. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Who then she went on to marry and have 2 kids with, and their daughters are both like showbiz kids, which I think is a kind of cool.
They're Nepo babies, as they're called these days.
Yeah. So, and one of them has a pretty successful career, I think. And so that's interesting, like, as a result of this. And I had no idea she was engaged to Randy Quaid. So
yeah,
that's the gossip column.
Well, and Howard Deutsch is no looker compared to Randy Quaid too. So it's kind of surprising.
Not Randy. He is a looker compared to Randy. He's not a looker compared to Dennis.
Dennis Quaid, sorry. So, all right. So, but we should do some more backstory. So Howard Deutsch is kind of interesting because he basically cut trailers for John Hughes, like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. That was it. That was his only experience. He had never directed anything. He gets brought on to do Pretty in Pink.
Yeah.
Basically doesn't really know what he's doing. He stumbles into having this incredible cinematographer and Fujimoto, who's a Japanese cinematographer, who goes on to shoot Silence of the Lambs, and so he basically says, like, if it wasn't for Tak, he was like his teacher. Okay. He had to reshoot a large part of Pretty in Pink because John Cryer was supposed to have been the one that wins the girl, Ducky, if you recall.
I do recall Ducky.
And Molly Ringwald apparently described
Eric Stoltz or Andrew McCarthy.
Oh, that's really great. Andrew McCarthy's pretty miserable too.
Oh my God, he's worse. Anyway,
I agree, he's worse.
Anyway,
good call.
on with your story.
Yeah, and then the funny thing is, Molly Ringwald had a large part in saying like, nah, my character, me, literally, because they're practically teenagers. All these people, they're so young, and like, even Eric Stoltz talks about having an actual like movie crush on Mary Stuart Masterson. Like, they all talk about like this. It's no surprise that all these actors, like, who are also beautiful, constantly are falling in love with one another or not. And we heard the same with Say Anything and John Cusack and Fiona.
Ione Skye.
Ione Skye was really into John Cusack at that time, even though she was dating someone else. Blah blah. I love
Anthony Kiedis.
We're in the
got
full,
her pregnant.
Right. We're in full gossip mode with all this.
Yeah, I love it. This is a new element to this show.
That's the TMZ Family Pictures podcast.
Exactly.
And so Molly Ringwald was talking about if John Cryer, his role was originally offered to Robert Downey Jr. And she says, like, I could have seen falling for Robert Downey Jr., but John Cryer, So she kind of kiboshed it. And so they had to reshoot the ending that she gets, what's his name, who we don't,
Andrew McCarthy.
Andrew McCarthy instead. Anyway.
Yeah.
All this said,
John Cryer, Andrew McCarthy. Can you imagine that?
I know.
That's not much of a choice. Poor Molly.
No, it really isn't. I would have chosen John Crier's at least more interesting, right? Andrew McCarthy just had his like
John
weird
Cryer's
stare.
Freaking annoying though.
He's like the character. If he looked at you from around the corner and you saw him, you'd be like, "Fuck, who's that creepy dude?"
John Cryer was really like convincing as like the drama kid at school.
Yeah,
that you want nothing to do with.
Right. Yeah, except for her. Anyway, so the idea is like Howard Deutsch is given this second film off of the success
Is it Dutch or Deutsch?
Deutsch.
Deutsch.
Okay.
He's
given this film some kind of wonderful, and he's reading the script, and the original script is more in the vein of, I think, like Ferris Bueller Day Off, and the Keith characters trying to pull off the most perfect date, and the script literally had like the Blues Angels flying over the restaurant during the dinner to like showcase how he pulled all this off. Right, that's much more like Ferris Bueller's, and he's like, I don't see Stoltz doing this, like, or just he couldn't find, and he tries to get Michael J. Fox and calls him up directly. Michael J. Fox is like, who the fuck are you? And then he gets
I'm doing lines for a New York Serious, like, wasn't Michael J. Fox in his serious part of his career after this? After in 87?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's still got like, and so Deutsch gets like
Big
calls
lights,
from
bright
his
city,
agents.
bright lights,
Yeah,
big city.
yeah. He's getting phone calls from like Michael J. Fox's lawyers and agents and saying, "Don't you dare ever do this again." And because of all this and like not being able to figure out the cast for this film, he gets fired, and they hire Martha Coolidge. And I think Deutsch stumbles into success in large part because of Martha Coolidge. This is really, and this is one of my hot takes of this. Okay. This is actually Martha Coolidge's film. All right.
Who's behind Real Genius and Valley Girl. So right
and I
there,
love Valley
amazing.
Girl. Yeah.
Both of them. I love them both.
And like it's number one, he owes the setting not being in Chicago because of Coolidge, that it's set in like San Pedro and this kind of suburban, just one of the areas of LA that's a mixture of classes and whatnot. And
it's down by Terminal Island. It's right near the water. And in fact, I moved to LA in 1990, and one of my first sojourns was over the bridge from Long Beach, California, and I'm forgetting the name of the bridge, to San Pedro to go and see this high school where they filmed Some Kind of Wonderful. And
that's awesome.
WPA 1930s.
Yeah, I noticed that plaque.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
But yeah, I went there. I've been there.
And so, famously Hughes, who was, wrote for magazines, wrote for National Lampoon, and Deutsch talks about this too. The man was a machine. He could type out a script in a fever dream constantly. Deutsch tells it, and this is often tells a story about how he would give pages like the Kiss That Would Kill script came to him just like one afternoon out of nowhere. It wasn't in the original script, and he's like, "You got to do this part." And he's like, "Oh my God, of course we're going to do this. This is one of the best scenes of the film." And then he talks about like how he's staying with Hughes in some apartment, and Hughes is up all night typing, and he says, "Get here, read this." And he's like, oh, fuck, is this more changes to Some Kind of Wonderful? And it's no. And it's the first 50 pages of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And he had never, and it's like, I don't know what this is in, if this is any good, but tell me what you think. So he's like, rewriting for Martha Coolidge, who's more serious, more dramatic. And she casts Mary Stuart Masterson. She casts Eric Stoltz. And Deutsch tried to
Sam Pedro, like you said.
Yeah, she tries to find, and so she finds out one day the associate producer's like saying like, you need to come with me, and the associate producer's like literally crying as they're heading to this other building, and poor Martha Coolidge and she's telling this story to the first time in this interview, and she's saying like, holy fuck, did like Eric Stoltz die or something? What the hell's happening? And she gets fired because apparently John Hughes and Deutsch have made up, and as part of their reconciliation, Deutsch is getting the movie back. And this is literally a week before the film is supposed to start shooting. And that's why we have Leah Thompson being grabbed at the last minute. He tried to get rid of Eric Stoltz.
Yeah, Howard Deutsch did.
Yeah. So it's
that's an
much
interesting
more
story. There's a lot that comes there. So we'll
exactly. And it's much more that's why I think like the themes and the approach to this film are so Deutsch is like an accidental director in a lot of ways, ultimately. And
I think his career shows that too.
Yeah, and he talks about, and I'm not going to disagree with him. I give him credit for working through making this weird love triangle of Keith and Watts and Amanda Jones work, and he was relentless with especially Eric Stoltz on set.
Yeah, and that's great because there's such a great point in the DVD extras where Leah Thompson, and you're thinking Leah Thompson gets on and she says something to the effect of let me see if I can find it.
It's about how he was a bit of a method actor. He liked to stay in character.
Said, Eric Stoltz was seen as stubborn, or as some of the cast saw it, as silly, because he wouldn't get out of character.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, what a hardcore smackdown to call. Like, his whole method acting thing for this movie was just kind of silly.
Yeah.
And, like, they wouldn't
because
let him
it's a silly movie. This isn't like, Daniel Day-Lewis, trying to do the, Gangs of New York and creating one of the most incredible characters of all time on screen.
Exactly. But the fact is I guess this led to Stoltz and Deutsch having real kind of run-ins and ego problems that Leah Thompson and Masterson were kind of buffering between them. But there was a point where Stoltz was talking about in these DVD extras, like, Deutsch would take 38, 39, takes on a particular scene. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this isn't exactly Kubrick, right? This is not The
that's
Shining.
What I was thinking too. Yeah. We're not trying to wear down Tom.
Jack Nicholson, right?
Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's relationship and ruin it on Eyes Wide Shut, and make them just like bow to your ideas of what a relationship should be by wearing you down endlessly.
And there's some interesting, just subtle pieces on that, because Eric Stoltz was suggesting that the reason Deutsch was doing it, even years later in 2006, that to break him, right? To kind of power control him. So I thought, wow. Who knew all this was going on behind just a kind of throwaway, teenage movie?
Yeah, I mean, this is as a complete aside, but it's so interesting as you watch those interviews. They're all so dancing along like this, like socially appropriate Hollywood, socially appropriate line. They're all being super careful, which is probably understandable. I mean, obviously acting and putting yourself out there and even directing and trying to make sense of what's going to work and not knowing for sure what's going to working unless you're like, fucking Stanley Kubrick, you feel really exposed. Right. And so they're ultimately, I feel like very forgiving. And that's the thing. It's like, even Eric Stoltz, much older, recognizes probably in that interview, you get a glimpse of he recognizes he was probably being a bit of a diva.
Yeah. Totally. And the only one who in those series of interviews who comes off pretty like whatever was Mary Stuart Masterson. Like she just seems she just had good stories to tell and seemed really cool.
Yeah. She's on to a different life. She's actually, I mean, where I am right now, she's in the Hudson Valley. I was reading about her. She's like, yeah, I'm on to other things in my life at this point.
Good for her. And she seems so cool. And like, I was, and she's great in this. So anyway, a lot of kind of just drama for the making of it. The last bit of drama is this is also the film that ruined the relationship between John Hughes and Molly Ringwald.
Right.
Because John actually wanted... John, I'm on a first-name basis. John, I called him, and John said...
Well, he's dead, by the way, so...
That's right, he did die. But when you look at all the films he wrote, even up until his death, it was just crazy. But
yeah, he was so prolific.
So prolific. But anyway, he really wanted Molly to play the role of Amanda Jones.
Right.
She said, no, I'm kind of want to move beyond the high school thing. Kind of like John Cusack was saying in Say Anything. Like, I'm kind of done with this.
Yeah.
But then I guess Hughes took it personally and was like, nope, you're dead to me.
Right. Well, he did the same thing to Deutsch. So you got the sense that like John Hughes was very sensitive. He knew at this point his power. Like the studio really, I mean, this guy is cranking out scripts like, you know, there's nothing going, and there's hit after hit after hit coming out of him, and they're just like, whatever he wants, we'll do. And so that's how we had, Martha Coolidge getting ejected just days before the set. And she talked about, like, too, just as the last aside, how, she got home and she's greeted with basically a check for the full fee for directing the movie. And she gets all of these phone calls from all of these people, producers and other directors saying like, that's biz, baby. And she describes how she finally felt like she's finally part of the Hollywood tribe, like, because she was so blameless in this whole situation. And they were all saying as much. It's like, it's not your fault, man. You just got screwed by a diva in John Hughes.
Yeah, and it's a good take, too, also the idea that, maybe some of her early choices and framing was what made this movie what it is. And I think that's a good transition to say, what is this movie? MPS, like we've talked for 30 minutes.
Why is this a family picture, Jim Groom?
Well,
we're talking about teen drama, real life drama. Come on.
Yeah, I think for me, I was immediately thought of this film after we did Say Anything last week because of this idea of the overbearing father. And, the figure of the teenager who's trying to find their way and trying to make sense of what they do next, right? And the family in this film is all around. Keith, who's played by Eric Stoltz, is this kind of, how would you say, new wave, artisty teen who doesn't fit in at school. He actually has a job.
He's really sensitive, and he is sensitive. He's a sensitive soul, and we have to listen to him closely because he doesn't bring his voice up any more than this.
And in that famous Kevin Bacon interview, John Hughes says he very much identifies with Eric Stoltz.
John Hughes also spoke like this in the entire interview.
John Hughes is a trip. You should go, if nothing else, go listen to him talk.
Clearly, this was a proxy for John Hughes.
I like John Hughes in a weird way. But
yeah, me too. He's odd. He's justifiably odd, where like Keith, when we get to the final portrait of Amanda Jones, you're like,
I thought we agreed that you were going to rein in your Eric Stoltz hatred. I thought we'd had a contract. We are
just getting started. I tore up that contract, and I have multiple points to talk about the stalking emo character that he is.
We had decided. So
it starts right from the beginning, Jim, when Leah Thompson's character, Amanda Jones, had just got it on with rich boy Hardy at her house. Her mom must have been away, and he's just leering and going, "Oh, Amanda Jones," from his front door. That's just the first one. He likes
her. It's not like he does anything weird. He's not like a peeping
Tom.
Oh,
yes, he does.
What does he do that's weird?
Okay, let's start with stalking her as she is in her gym class, what is Eric doing? How is Keith not in class himself? No, he's probably skipped class so he can stalk Amanda Jones as she's going into gym class, sees her get in trouble, and it's literally got the creepy like horror movie POV where it's his point of view from above, like he's literally leering over, lording over her. Right?
If you let me talk. He had a free period. He was asked to go out and clean up around the bleachers. He was doing that. He overheard. Right. That's the one really strange small.
It's really strange. He's also like obsessively drawing her in the library, and Amanda Jones literally feels uncomfortable seeing him look at her over and over and over again, and has to look to her boyfriend to protect her. Yes, he's trying to protect her. Hardy, not a bad guy.
Hardy Jens, who's telling the young girl who's the 9th grader, I guess, if they're 12th graders, like, stay close, but not that close. When I call you and when I need you. I mean, Keith is trying to save Amanda Jones from the very bad
this is the failure of John Hughes. Some women should not need saving. They're like Mary Stuart Masterson. They need to and he doesn't recognize her value system as being something that is sensible, giving her context. She is given no more. We'll get into this later. I have more to say about Amanda Jones.
You have a lot. Look.
But let's continue.
Go see your therapist and let me continue.
Can you just talk about the Nelson family unit for us, please?
I will, yes. So as we talked about overbearing fathers, there is this point at which Keith's father, which is Clifford Nelson, is really excited. He's a great character. He's played by John Ashton, who shows up again in Breaking Away. He's the brother of Dennis Quaid, so it's all related.
Yep. And he's also already done his Beverly Hills Cop moment. So he's got a bit of a name as an actor even at this point.
Yeah, and they say he was great. He was fun. Like he had none of the drama. He was just there to have fun, to be that
exactly.
dad.
Yeah.
But anyway, his father, who's a tire salesman, is really excited about Keith going to college. And Keith has been working at a kind of automobile repair
phys
shop.
Ed, Jim. Co-ed phys ed. Never
excited.
could imagine.
But like the father in Say Anything, he's more excited about the college in some ways than Keith is. And I think you see that's kind of some of the tension that's going on in the family. He's never been to college. He'd be the first one in the family to go to college. So there's a lot of pressure on Keith.
Yeah, but he should have been putting all his money on Cindy because she's clearly got the chops to go to college.
She is the one, the younger one who Antonella loved.
I fucking love Cindy too.
Stuff like, what did she say? What was some of the things she came up with?
Oh God! I mean, I didn't quote her, but she's basically a little know-it-all girl, and which is awesome. Like she's just like clearly a savant of trivia and how the little physical world works, if I recall, and she goes on to play the older sister in Full House too. So she's got an interesting little career. There's a number of TV actors that came from and come into this film, which is kind of interesting as well. And Leah Thompson, honestly, is most famous for being a TV actor for the. She's like an illustrator in the city, Caroline in the City, I think is the name of the show that she did.
That was in the 90s, was it?
Yeah. Really successful show. Ran for like a bazillion seasons.
Huh. So anyway, back to the Nelson family. This is a pretty, intact family unit. You included a screenshot for our notes for this. It has the Nelson family in a famous shot at their dining room table, all eating. And there's a lot of banter back and forth between Laura, the middle sister, and Keith. But the dad is there in his leisure sweater, as you describe it.
He's got a vest sweater.
I love the TV in the back. It's one of those old wooden TV furniture TVs. Yeah. I mean, this is a definitely identifiable space. This is a house in San Pedro, on the other side of the tracks, but not. I mean,
no, it's a very middle class family. Yeah, very much so. Like it was the idea of like traditional attainable middle class through just, basic, union labor, whatever it was, which you get a sense like it wouldn't surprise me if Cliff was in a union at the tire factory or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so you have the dad, you already described the little sister who's kind of a know-it-all. The middle sister's interesting because she wants to be part of the cool kids.
Yeah, she's the social climber.
Yeah, she does. She right when Amanda Jones and her wealthy friends show up and drop Keith off, she pops into screen as Keith leaves, and that's a funny scene. I remember seeing that, and she pops in, and the one girl, I think, what's her name? I forget her name in the movie. Shane. She's like, oh my God, or she says something to that
She's
effect.
aghast at like, who is this miscreant? It's like something out of like Victorian times and an Oliver Twist, and like the character asking for more to a person of class, right?
Exactly.
And so and that's the classic trope of John Hughes, and that like the wealth or have no moral codes. It's like they're all about themselves, and that this middle class, even just working class, but seemingly very middle class, working class family, they have all of the norms that we should be valuing.
Exactly.
In a family and in characters. And that's one of the things I bristle at, especially with the Amanda Jones character and how her code is considered very one-dimensional for trying to use, her looks for social mobility. And John Hughes really finds that problematic and thinks of her as a lesser person morally for doing this, which we'll get into even more.
No, I agree. And unlike Keith, who's kind of at one, he kind of just wants to explore his art, and he wants to not be pushed around at school, and he wants to be someone, but not in the sense of a social climber, but in the sense of kind of his own identity, right? And one of the things that struck me, and I wonder it struck you, is when I was listening to that Kevin Bacon, John Hughes interview, something that came up again and again from John Hughes was this idea of self-reliance. It was like this whole idea of self-reliance. Like he wants his characters, his heroes, to be self-reliant, to not give into peer pressure, but it's interesting because a lot of people, and I've read this about John Hughes, and it's interesting, kind of align John Hughes with a more conservative Reagan era vision of this kind of individual, and the individual, even though he's talking about the struggle between classes, there's also this rugged individualism that comes at the heart of his characters. And you can see that a little bit in this one. And even the actors like Eric Stoltz and Mary Stuart Masterson and Leah Thompson had taken on the language of individualism when they were interviewed in 1987, which gave you the sense that this is something people talked on the set. They were you're individuals, you're reliant, you're going to break out of the mold. Right. And I wonder if that's kind of part of the undergirding ideology of some of this kind of movie is, Keith is the great artistic individual who's going to break out of the mundane mold and make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is like, we know these are archetypes. That's kind of the mold of John Hughes. But we ultimately forgive him typically, and I forgive him in this film because of the warmth of the characters. But so much of that warmth is all coming through one person, and that's Watts. And we should talk about Watts and Watts' relationship. Like the idea of Watts and Keith finding one another in grade school, being both more sensitive, having creative alliance. Like he likes to paint, she likes to play the drums, she's a quote unquote tomboy, basically, just which now we just like don't use that phrase so much anymore, at least my kids don't. And it's just like, you're just someone who doesn't align yourself with a portrait of femininity of the time, and she's and so they both have this. They're
it's
aligned.
1987. A woman can be what they want.
My mom's a plumber.
Exactly.
I loved his character. That was so great. So Watts is this. She more than once alludes to basically having no good familial structure, and cutting Keith for dissing on his dad in particular, it's like at least you have someone who cares. At least you have someone. It's the Ali Sheedy character, if anything, like from the Breakfast Club, but it's without her friends. So it's like if Ali Sheedy, clearly would probably have had a Keith, but she says in the film, like, I have no friends. You're my only friends. But anyway, so, and that's what's so important is ultimately you have these two sensitive people that have found their ways to stand alone because they have one another. And that's supposed to be, Watts again and again, like, is talking about how I don't need my family because I have you. Right. And so, Watts sees in Keith her surrogate family for sure. And is frankly annoyed how he hasn't recognized this yet, and is constantly dismissive of the relationship being something that he just deserves to have because they've been together. I mean, it's understandable that he would expect their friendship to be one that would survive most anything because they've probably been friends for so long.
Yeah, I agree. And the other piece here is, isn't it remarkably similar to Lily Taylor in Say Anything and Lloyd Dobler? Dobler has these women friends, which was kind of atypical. And like, they're really sensitive, and Dobler was sensitive. I want to be hurt, right? I'm ready to be hurt. And that makes me think Cameron Crowe probably stole a lot of Say Anything from Some Kind of Wonderful. So in fact, just like Martha Coolidge, this is Martha Coolidge's film. I think, Say Anything is John Hughes' film.
Oh, come on.
Hot take. We should have a special sound.
There should be
hot take. I never have a hot take, so that's my first hot take. Thank you.
John Hughes the great debate of John Hughes versus Cameron Crowe is one that should be had in some ways. Because like Cameron Crowe's characters are definitely grittier in all senses of the idea. They're richer characters generally speaking, but John Hughes is so good at tugging at our heartstrings and finding warmth in characters, and frankly being really, really good at casting these characters that we can't help but fall for their warmth and their identities. And that's what Mary Stuart Masterson does. She's just so charming, like her goofy accents and her just like puckishness over and over again. What does she say? Don't get too confident, Studley, or whatever, or something like that.
That's right. Exactly.
If you break his heart, I'll break your face. All these like little quotables from her.
Don't go overboard, Studley.
And then just portray, but truly like where Eric Stort's sensitivity is only has one note, and it's, I talk quietly and I'm just going to be like, what? And this. Whereas Mary Stuart Masterson has emotional response to things.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm going to let you talk.
Okay. So, and she literally like, she's vulnerable. She is excited about things. She believes in certain things, incredibly passionate. My favorite line of hers is like, when they're talking about his date with Amanda Jones being a setup where Hardy is going to beat him up with all his friends and stuff. And we later find out this is true, but it's not because Amanda Jones is setting this up, but it's really Hardy. But anyway, she knows it's bullshit. And he's like, come on, it's not. She actually likes me. And he's like, I'll bet my hands on it. Right. Like, and that is everything. It's like you, my hands and my drums. Like, that's it. That's all that matters to me. And she again and again, it's like, you're my family. And he's like, what? Huh?
Yeah, that's the whole with the famous kiss that I'm sure we'll get to. But like, that's like delusional, like has no idea. But it also is another reason why I love this movie, and we'll get to that. But one of the things I always liked about John Hughes films is the way in which the family you come from defines your station.
Oh, and I like this take. Yeah,
defines your character. And I think that is deeply ingrained within a lot of these John Hughes films, and that whole idea in the 80s, which wasn't really dealing with race and gender in the same way that films in the 90s and 2000s would start to take on, hopefully. Spike Lee was coming up. But the idea that there was a sense of a class struggle. And that when you're in these public high schools and the rich kids feel like they got a free ride, but the working class kids or the poorer kids, were kind of shit on. That was, something I think a lot of people related to. You were rooting for Keith as the underdog. You were rooting for a lot of these characters. And I don't know, like it's pretty, basic, but he taps into that beautifully, to your point about what John Hughes does well. Right? He taps into that. And then you bring in characters not only like Keith, but then the real, I think, for me, the other star of this film besides Watts is Duncan. Or
Elias Koteas,
the skinhead is as they refer to him. And he's amazing. I mean, he is acting his ass off. I think this is his second movie ever. And the idea is like he's just this kind of badass who's always in detention, and Keith hears that Leah Thompson, when he's stalking, to your point, which I'm kind of convinced of, Stockard Channing, the great from Grease, actually gives her detention. And so she's like, Keith's like, she's in morning detention.
That's not Stockard Channing.
That was Stockard Channing, absolutely.
No, it's not.
You don't think that's Stockard Channing?
No, I'm blanking. I looked her up. It's not Stockard Channing. I thought it was her first, but it's not.
It's not. Okay, well.
It doesn't matter.
God, it looked like her. But anyway, he hears that she's getting detention. I guess this is another point to your stalker argument. He goes and pulls the fire alarm, and he's getting ready so he can hang out with her. But he wants to meet her,
How about he just call her on the phone?
I don't know. I mean, it's complicated. You're looking for possibilities. But he ultimately does confront her. But anyway, she talks her way. She's
from across the street while he's stalking her in mall culture, and sees that she's getting like harassed by her boyfriend, and it's like, hey, now you want to go out with me? So sorry, I'm taking you out of the Duncan mode, which is.
I mean, you got to go to therapy for your Eric Stoltz problem. So she goes he goes to detention, but Amanda Jones had sweet talked her way out of it.
Yeah, so with the driving eds teacher.
That's right. So he's stuck with the badass kids, who amongst is Elias Koteas, who's amazing. He's got a knife. He's carving up his desk. They're both artists, so Eric Stoltz is showing him his art, and then Elias Koteas is showing him art. It's just wonderful. And
I mean, what? Can I describe how he's introduced? Like when he's such a dick to Mary Stuart, to Watts, like calling her a lesbian. It's pretty gross. But then he instantly is super redeemable because he gets busted by the teacher when Keith almost gets in a fight with him briefly, and so we're like, who's this guy? Like, because he's kind of a dick, and Keith and he's terrible to Keith and to Watts. But then he gets busted, and this teacher's like rifling through his pockets. Which, number one, can you imagine like teachers putting hands on students anymore? Like, you never do this. Rifling through his pockets, pulls out cigarettes, pulls out like a little Jack Daniels bottle, and then my favorite, a deck of nudie cards.
A nudie card, right?
And then his quote is like to him is like, "Those were a gift from your wife."
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, you're going to detention, young man, right? Yeah, but he's great.
And that's how he's in detention. Yeah.
And he shows up again and again, but actually Keith and Duncan form a bit of a friendship. And that's a whole kind of, sub story that kind of goes on, and we'll see at the end.
And then the idea of like, I like this idea of how you kept, in the notes talking about like Duncan's family is something we get a glimpse of too.
Yeah, we do. We see, at the end on the perfect date, right?
Right. Yeah.
His dad is a security guard for
the museum.
Art museum.
Yeah, well,
and his dad's like a thick New York accent. He's like,
yeah.
Listen, Duncan, if anything comes back about this and I lose my job, you're in the can. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry, Pops, don't worry.
And the thing is like, Duncan's part of this cohort of the true working poor, right? And they're in Howard Hughes's space, like this is the Bender crowd, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is
and this is sadly also the only place where there's people of color, right? This is famously one of John Hughes's big faults. It's like people of color are just non-existent in his world, for the most part. And they're seen almost as like, they're if it wasn't for the humanization of Duncan through like the sharing of art and then the subsequent party scene, they're also seen as trash in quite a bit, for the most part. And that's like kind of like classic John Hughes. These are the real marginalized characters. Never mind Keith, right? These are the ones that you should be really steering clear of. They're like, in a Weird Science, they're the punk like demon, gang that comes and invades the party. And that literally happens again, but this time we're rooting for that. The punk demon game that shows up to the Hardy party.
Yeah, what does Katea say what does Duncan say when he goes there? He's like, I think it's safe to say that this party is about to become a historical fact. Right. And one of the things that was interesting is people said that Hughes was very particular about his lines. You don't change the lines. But Koteas changed them all.
Yeah, he liked it. He was given a short leash for being someone that he was clearly creative and he appreciated that. And I mean, I guess that's what you would unsurprisingly say about John Hughes is it wouldn't surprise me that he recognized talent because he was so good at it. And this particular actor had the ability to improvise and was willing to allow it. And so that's it's definitely interesting. But, I like how you also like, as far as so the setup, not that it matters in the context of it, but the setup is, stalking Keith yet again is staring down Amanda Jones in the strip mall, like it's like 80s culture strip mall USA. And there's, of course, kids everywhere. Yeah. And he's literally lurking from across the street at Amanda Jones. He's put on an outfit, like, so he's finally supposedly that implies like he's going to finally engage her. And he gets in a fight with Hardy, Jen's her boyfriend, because he's again like hitting on like a 10th grader, and she breaks up with
Jones
them.
Had enough of it, right?
Yeah, and so in this moment, he asks her out from across the street, and it's really weird and it's awkward. I'll give him one thing: is he does because it's a lot of pressure when someone asks you to do something. People are more likely to say yes. It's like, Jim, I'm right in front of you. Will you do this podcast with me? And you can't say no. You can't say no because we're already in the middle of it.
I'm not doing
and he does at least like say, if this is a bad time, it's fine. But and that's the MacGuffin for the rest of the film. And like, Hardy's going after her still, and like, but at the same time he's like jaded, so he wants to punch out Keith. But the best part is really it's more about Watts, who's how her relationship to Keith is evolving as a result of his pursuit of Amanda Jones.
Yeah, that's true. And she keeps on getting more and more upset, and you see that, and it's pretty clear. Like, my son came in and watched 10 minutes of the film, and so he was like, oh, so she likes him, but he has no idea, and he likes her.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much the plot. Yeah. And then he left. He's like, you and your old 80s films. And that was it. But, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. But Mary Stuart Masterson, and I think Eric Stoltz gives her full credit. He says it's her film. And she really kills it. And she's amazing in the role. And I think that's true. She's so lovable. And, there's something about her that, you just really connect with, and you want her to ultimately get the guy at the end, which is strange because one of the things that people said that about this film, I think it was Pauline Kael said, like, she loved it as a teen film because she said it's one of the few teen films where the question was even asked, like, should he get the girl? Like, is this the right girl?
Because he's a stalker.
Well, there's that. And obviously you need to work with that. But Pauline Kael had no problem with that. And also asked, like, was they even right? Like, was it a smart thing? Should they even be together? And ultimately the answer that, they come up with is no. Like, it's the wrong connection. And he should be with Watts. And I think one of the things, and here's my personal story out of this movie. So 1987, it's like 10th, 11th grade for me. And I had a girlfriend when I was in elementary school, right? Like we were kind of like, not serious, but you know what I mean? Like I like her, she likes me. It's 5th grade, right? And so we were friends throughout, right? And then we went to middle school and we were still friends. But like, we always kind of like, she was just someone who I'd been friends with and I'm still friends with and just is a great person. She says to me in 87, she's like, there's this really great film that you should go see. And I really liked it because at the end of the movie, he gives the earrings to the one who really deserved them. And she said, that kind of reminded me of you and me. And, obviously, I'm 11th grade. I'm still a bit
subtle hint, Jim.
I never stalked her, right? We were always friends. Actually, we never had.
No, that's not the stalking character.
Enough.
The girl you really like, the one you thought you were supposed to be with, but were wrong, is who you're stalking.
Exactly. That's true. Actually, that would be right. You're correct. But there was no romantic, or there was no, physical relationship between us. But that once she said that to me and then I went to see the movie, I was like, oh, like that kind of, he had tapped in to that kind of sense of, the complexity of, a teenager dealing with relationships and their lot in life. And I think this film does that well. And the fact that it deals with it with a kind of new wave approach, not fully punk, but somewhat new wave. And John Hughes talks about the soundtracks and how important they are to him and the fact that he picks all the songs and then he writes to all the songs.
Yeah, he's a maniac.
And actually builds the songs into his writing and frames them. I felt that. You feel that with his films with the music. Yeah. Say what you will about, his choice of music, which I like. But I love this soundtrack. I actually, right now I have Repo Man here, but I have just off screen this soundtrack, and I've been listening to it, and it's like a big soundtrack of 87. It's got some great tunes on it, some new wave stuff, Flesh for Lulu, right? Yeah. Gene Loves Jezebel. I mean, it's good. Pete Shelley. I mean, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, so let's talk about two more things at least. One is this... the encounter with his dad. So as part of the big date, you've mentioned the earrings, right? And so the earrings are this thing that Keith spied Amanda Jones was borrowing from Shane, and she loves them. And this is oh, I'm going to buy her really, really expensive earrings to win her over. And so this is part of the creepy treehouse of Keith is he's doing all these things not out of getting to know Amanda Jones. And this is ultimately the flaw of Keith's pursuit of Amanda Jones is he's not actually interested in her in a person. And frankly, John Hughes is barely interested in her as a person. And there's two ways I would talk about that. It's Keith sees her simply as a beautiful object by painting her, drawing her, needing to be adorned and rescued from the horrible rich people, and she'll never have to do that again. There's a line, it's the worst line of the film. You'll never have to stoop down. Now that I've given you the earrings from the right side of the tracks rather than the wrong side of the tracks, you'll never have to stoop so low. And it's such bullshit because it gives Amanda Jones zero agency in anything she's done in her life, and one of the ways I was thinking about Amanda Jones is it reminded me of the murdering mom of the film, the TV movie that you don't like. And the culture of social mobility around cheerleading. This is we may disrespect it because it seems superficial that she's using her looks to find social mobility. But other than that, she's shown as having no other interest and no other abilities other than positioning herself around a man, even though she said, I'm going to finally stand on my own at the very end. But the idea is that this is not necessarily, you get a sense that she might be with a single mom. Like, we don't know for sure. But late at night, she's speaking to her mother as she's about to go out with Keith. And so it rejects her agency of like making this choice to try to find, a place in society through these people that have accepted her. And I'm not saying like they're good people as presented by John Hughes, but at the same time, even the Shane character has some regret of how she's like kind of torturing her and ignoring her for rejecting Hardy. And so when Keith buys these earrings, this is supposed to be the thing that's going to win her over. But more importantly, Keith buys these earrings by draining his college account. And his dad has something to say about this.
Yeah, his dad's pissed, and then gets the big dramatic moment in the film. His dad had been kind of watching the paper and saying, "Hey, Keith, the T-bills went up 75 cents. You know what that means?" And then he asked, "What is that? Why did they go up 75 cents?" Which he's great. That character is so fun, and that's so memorable. But I mean, it's a kind of a confrontation, and it was actually a real confrontation where Keith's dad was pissed and blew up.
You're gonna put the fucking money back.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna put the fucking money. And then Keith is like, "You're 18. What do you know, Keith?" And then Eric Stoltz has
I'm gonna be 19, 20. Exactly. When it's my life.
That's right. Eric Stoltz has a moment, and so you get the sense of a real argument that happens in a real house, and it kind of simmers down, and they go about, and it doesn't become this tragedy that you'd have now where everyone shoots each other or whatever. But
or he'd get kicked out of the house, and it's like, well, you're on your own now, kid. But go ahead, you first.
No, but there's just a sense he's a stupid 18-year-old at the same time.
And
he blew his money on his $10,000 or whatever, $7,000 on a pair of earrings, which is probably not a
let's
good
speculate
call.
this. I couldn't help but doing this. I looked up the cost of I was guessing like 2 to 3 carat diamond earrings, and today they'd be about $6,000-$7,000, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm sure they get much more expensive depending on who's making them. And so that would be ballpark like $2,500 to $3,000. And I was just trying to imagine, because, what was your job in high school? Did you have a job in high school?
Yes, I answered phones at a pizzeria.
Do you remember how much money you made per hour?
No, they would just pay me it was like an Italian Sicilian family, so they just give me here's $20.
It's a Sicilian thing. So you were never a salaried employee, paid taxes, anything like that?
Never. No.
Okay, so I did.
I have been since then.
Yeah, but
I do pay taxes, so if you're watching.
You pay Italian taxes or American taxes?
Both. Anyway.
So the minimum wage back then in 1987 was literally $3.35. Nice. All right. Okay. And so he's a gas station attendant. He's got a little bit of skills. So I was trying to be optimistic that maybe he got paid up to $4 an hour. And I remember that's about what I got paid to be a lifeguard. I was a lifeguard, trained lifeguard, and I got paid $4.25 an hour. And so if he were a 9-to-5er with that minimum $4 an hour, he would have made $8,320 a year. That would have been his annual salary if he worked 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, which is nuts, right? That's it. But he's only 16, and so he's probably working at most a quarter of that. So that's about $2,000. And then I just did this exercise of taxes. Well, he'd still have to pay at least $500 in taxes. So that's $1,500 a year. But he's got an epic record collection. He must have had 100, 150 albums.
A lot of albums. It's true.
A lot of albums. And back then you buy a lot of used albums, but he might be buying foreign records. So those could get pricey because he's like an emo, new wave kid. He's got to get those UK releases, right? Those are expensive.
It's true.
Remember the import section? You're like, how the hell do you pay for those?
No one goes near that.
Well, he probably did. Watts was probably pressuring him.
And exactly. This just came from the UK. This is the latest punk.
And so between that and he goes to shows and maybe some movies and food and pitching in some gas money to Watts occasionally for her Mini Cooper, which was amazing, which was a true English vehicle because the steering wheel was on the wrong side. Right. And so it made sense. He's probably taking home only $1,100 a year, and he's only been able to work for 3 years. Not even, because he's not through his entire 18th year.
Yeah.
And so he's only made about $3,000 to this point in his life. That's it. That's all he's taken home and saved, $3,000. And that's between the earrings and the dinner with the caviar, blah, blah, blah.
The real point there is that would pay for a year of college.
Isn't that exactly?
The hot take
then.
on that.
Yeah, especially if he went to the California state school system, it'd practically be probably only $800 a year.
It's true, actually, because I went to the California state school system in 1990, 91, and I spent $35 a semester for community college.
Wow.
And $500 a quarter for UCLA.
Wow.
So $1,500 a year for UCLA in 1992.
Yeah.
$35 a semester for Long
So he
Beach
had
College.
probably the full, at least 2 years worth of state school college.
Yeah.
And he's blowing it on Amanda Jones, but in the end.
But he has a reason. I mean, he's not and he says this to his dad. He's like, Dad, I mean, I'm not impractical. I'm not an idiot. There's a reason why I'm doing this. And part of the reason, and this goes back to the John
it's sex. It's sex.
Not just that. But that
Mother, the girl is sex.
It's not just that.
Any fool can get into college. Only a precious few may say the same about Amanda Jones.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great moment.
That's his sister, by the way.
That's right. And she tells the sister Laura on that DVD special tells a crazy story.
Yeah.
She goes, did you remember that one where her
oh my God,
mom
yeah. Her
died of
familial
cancer?
situation's terrible.
Oh my God. That was, and then she gets this role. But anyway, I kind of one of the things I liked about Keith in this film was that, he wasn't an idiot. He had thought about these things, but he also didn't care about his dad's. It was his dad's vision, not his. He had an alternative one, and that still today is of value. If your kid
stand on your own, son.
Yes, if your kid came to you and said, "I don't want to do the college. I want to go another way and do my own thing and reimagine it," like Cliff, you would be a little bit "Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense," especially for Cliff, who hadn't been there and sees that as the only way to get outside of selling tires.
Oh yeah, co-ed phys ed, Jim. Co-ed phys ed.
But so there is a moment, right, where you can kind of see Keith's vision, and then obviously the love part of this is when Keith does give Watts the rings and says, "You look pretty good wearing my future." Ugh. And that come on, that's a great line.
It's a bullshit line because
it's a great line.
It's a great moment because of Watts. It's not a great line in my mind. But let's back up and say why. Because number one, this is an obsession that he is putting his money into. It is an unhealthy obsession, right? He has this creepy. So just to finish the date a little bit, he basically is a dick because she knows it's a setup, which is actually not true. And so he's being a bit of an asshole to her. So he's going in this date with bad intentions initially. All right. And at dinner, they have a confrontation.
He thinks she's going to have him beat up.
But he's still going to give her he still bought her the diamond earrings. That's what I'm saying. He knows her intentions are ill-willed, but he buys these anyway for her. Come on. That's number one. So they work it out at dinner that this is not actually true, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Next stop on the date is Duncan's dad, who's the museum's security guard, gives them access to the museum at night while no one's there, which is really actually incredibly romantic. That would be so cool. Yeah. As someone who had this unlikely opportunity to tour the Louvre for for 45 minutes with a small group due to my wife's job, it's kind of amazing to be kind of alone in a massive museum because they're massive spaces with all this art, and understandably that is impressive. But then it says, "I have just one more piece to show you. It's right over there." And it's this portrait of Amanda Jones leaning against this graffitied wall with this dark space behind her where she comes from nowhere and is from the wrong side of the tracks. That's his image of her, and because he needs to rescue her. He's painted a portrait of a woman that needs rescuing. She has no agency for her.
She's searching.
Yes. And so this leads to the important aspect of this date, which is the real conversation, which is at the LA like open air amphitheater. It's very famous.
The LA Bowl, the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah, and poor Watts is up in the stands watching them, and they have this conversation, and this is where Amanda Jones is pegged as someone who is forced to say, "I can't." Nobody can. No, she says, "What is it?" They're talking about like the relationships they've had. Amanda Jones says, "I'd rather be next to someone for the wrong reasons than to be alone for the right ones." And that's how simplistic, according to John Hughes, her character is. And that's kind of bullshit. But she does tackle it because he says like, "I'd rather be right." And, you know, and so, but then it's like, she calls him a hypocrite, which is good. Because he is a hypocrite. He's using her as much as he thinks she's using him. And they kind of have it out, and that's fine. Which is a good
moment in the film, where he gets called for his bullshit and a little bit of his stalkerism, or what you want to call it.
This is her quote. It's like, "You're using me to pay back every guy with more money and more power than you. Paint it any color you want. You're still using me." And he's like, "You're right."
Yeah, and he admits to being right.
He does, and it has this like,
right.
And it has this emotional connection at the end where like he does chase Watts after the party, because the party is actually after this, and thank God Duncan comes to the rescue, and it's incredibly funny, and you know he's about to get pummeled to death, but Duncan and his cohort of detention miscreants, like they do that, like literally it's like the Weird Science Party, but the punks are actually the heroes rather than that.
And then Shane and that one guy with the long hair and the glasses. Yeah. They kind of have a moment where you think, "Oh my God!"
Shane. That's very that's very John Hughes. Like,
I love that.
That's his sense of humor, which I appreciate endlessly. Like he likes to play with, these little moments to create humor out of them. So
I agree. So, but what's your problem with "You look pretty good wearing my future"?
Because
it's a great line to end that movie, and then. The licking tins or whatever. I can't help falling in love with you. I forget the name of the band. But
the song in the moment, the line, it's just like. I mean, I guess he's investing in her in that regard, and so I like that. It's just that it's still she is his future. I guess is my qualm with that. It's not she. It's again a John Hughes. It's about the guy and like Watts is cool as shit, and she's going to be perfectly fine ultimately if she had to do it without him. And I would imagine for the most part Keith would have been fine too. Like he's got a sense of self, but Watts has got an equal sense of self, and I do like Watts is like I thought you'd figure this out, you moron, and he does, and so that's the best part. That's the better set of lines to me, is where Watts is like, I was hoping you'd, I didn't know, but I was hoping.
So let me ask you this. So we kind of went through the film, and what's your favorite scene in the movie?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it's ignoring a line. If I'm forced to, I mean, we didn't talk about the big kiss.
That's one I was thinking of.
Yeah, because it's literally sexy and that's wonderful, and like it makes you. Watts is just finally her like puckishness, pretend I'm a girl, and
that's right.
And
I know it's hard.
Right. I'd probably choose that. Because like it's just everyone falls in love with Mary Stuart Masterson at this moment, and how could you not? And there's other ones too where, when he's first apologizing to her, when he finds out from Laura, his sister, that in fact it is a setup. He at the time thinks it's Amanda Jones. That's also part of the setup. But he goes back to Watts because they have this strain when the date is made. There's a strain, And then to see Watts again, like kind of fall into his side, and the way that she does this so naturally. And that's why I'm just like, my eyes are on her all the time. And you just can't help but like, because she's just like this heart of gold character.
Yeah, she's great. One of the scenes that was funny to watch this time was, we didn't really talk about Hardy Jens. And so he comes and he's riding around in a convertible Corvette, and he rides into the garage where Keith works.
Yeah,
comes there, beep, comes.
Yeah.
Keith
that was like
out.
literally a speak of the devil moment.
Exactly. And so Amanda Jones is with him in the car. Keith fills it up, and then he's like, "Hey, check the oil." So he goes, and then while he's down there, Hardy Jens beeps. Like he gets all freaked out. And I just love that. Like, it was like such a great moment to show what a jerk Hardy Jens was.
Oh yeah.
And even when Amanda Jones is like, "Cut it out," and he's like, "Mind your own business." Oh
yeah. No, but who's worse? I mean, this is a James Spader from Pretty in Pink versus Craig Sheffer.
That's a good one. That would be a good MTV battle off. Battle box what we talked about. Yeah,
celebrity death match.
James Spader is pretty bad.
Oh, he's awesome bad. He's way worse in my mind.
He's a better bad guy. I like Craig Sheffer in this. I think he's good because he's believable. Like, there's that scene, like, he's really good at like gaslighting. He's like, "For someone so beautiful, I don't know how you can be so insecure." Like, he's really good at gaslighting Amanda Jones. And that's one of the moments where I like her, is she's kind of like, "What's happening here?" and then Eric Stoltz is staring at her.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. This movie is very much connected to my high school and to Tracy. So a big shout out to Tracy in that kind of moment. But also, like, it's the final one in the John Hughes kind of high school saga. And it's the one where he's kind of, I don't know, digging into the little like new wave, what it means to be unique. But it was super trippy for me to prepare for this in the way I do. And to hear John Hughes just talk and be interviewed was a trip. But then to hear him talk about this idea of self-reliance and the individual, and like what he was trying to create was this sense of, the teenage, figure should be resisting peer pressure and should be this, kind of Ralph Waldo Emerson-like individualist. And I don't know, it kind of gave me a whole new look on the John Hughes.
He's really he's really a John Milius style, doing teenage dramas rather than war movies. And
That's a good hot take. Hot take.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.